Welcome to this presentation about the Land Conservation Plan. As I indicated earlier, maybe before the meeting started, I'm hoping that this meeting, because it's being recorded, will be of use to a larger audience than just the two visitors that we have tonight. And so a lot of what I'm going to be doing, at least for the first part of the talk, is very carefully reading notes because I don't want to misspeak and then have problems later on. I hate doing this for a presentation, but I need to be very careful when I'm describing maps that I get where they came from correct. So anyway, this is the second of at least 3 presentations. The first presentation was done about a year ago, and it covered the first couple sections of the plan. It was one that I only just recorded myself through Zoom, without an audience. It was pretty dry, but it does talk about the earlier sections of the plan. So this section tonight, skip ahead a little bit, this is going to cover what we call conservation attributes in the town of Atkinson. A conservation attribute is just something that might be worthy of preserving. So I'll describe by giving examples of what that is. So the reason for doing the plan is to prepare a comprehensive data-driven plan for prioritizing Atkinson's dwindling open spaces and natural resources in order to help the town focus its efforts and leverage its conservation fund to protect those things. In other words, we don't want to spend time and money trying to conserve land that is of low environmental value. That's basically the gist behind the plan. The earlier presentation, as I mentioned, covered an introduction to the plan and the goals of the plan, the reasons for conserving land, and the methods available to us for conserving land. As I made the point in that presentation, conserving land is much more than just buying it. There's other things we can do, such as easements, which Sue is very familiar with. So anyway, that's what was in the first presentation. This one tonight, actually, I'm going to give 2 presentations. I have these structured as separate presentations. This part number 1 is conservation attributes in the town of Atkinson. And then, I'm going the wrong direction. Then following that, there is an analysis of conservation priorities and opportunities, which I'll give in the next talk tonight. And then probably another presentation on the conclusions and recommendations of the plan. So these are the 6 sections that are in the plan. In addition to that, there are 2 appendices. One is a brief history of conservation in Atkinson, which is not so brief. It's pretty detailed. If you want to know all of the warrant articles at town meetings that had anything to do with conservation, they're in here. If you want to know about any land that was bought and when it was bought, they're in here. There's a complete list of everybody who has served on the Conservation Commission since 1974. Stuff like that. Not really part of the plan, but very useful background. Gave me something to do during COVID, basically. And then there's another appendix, even larger, called The Current State of Conservation in Atkinson, which is even more maps that I was not planning to go over tonight, but maps for things such as, I guess I don't have a set of maps in here. Anyway, you can look at it later. That was kind of ad lib. So let's take a look at conservation attributes in the town of Atkinson. And what is a conservation attribute? It's best to give some examples. So one example would be various wetlands protection, such as buffers around wetlands, wildlife habitat protection and connectivity between wildlife habitats. Those are of value. Preservation of groundwater quality, that's important to pretty much everybody. And opportunities for walking trails and education on our town-owned land. So those are conservation attributes. And what's the best way to catalog conservation attributes? Well, maps. Lots of maps. Okay. So tonight we're going to be talking about lots of maps. Section 4 of the plan contains 14 maps. And they were produced by Rob Prine at RPC. They're GIS maps based on available GIS data. They give a good high-level picture of what's available in Atkinson. I underscore high-level picture because there's some caveats. But they must be verified by on-the-ground study. A lot of these were data taken from aerial photographs and other studies. They should never be used as a survey or looked at with a microscope or a micrometer. And sometimes they are incomplete or out of date. And you just have to realize that we're dealing with standard maps that are in GIS format that may not have been looked at very recently. But they do give a good high-level picture of what's available. So let's look at the maps. As I mentioned, there's 14 of them. This is map number 1. It came from, it's the same map that was in the master plan update in 2015. It has not been updated since then. If you look at the legend of the map, you see there's a lot of very different kinds of land use that existed at that time. From reading the table which is next to it, which I realize you can't read, I was disappointed that putting things up on the screen wasn't more legible. I don't know why that is. The original files are PDF files that are just enormous, but didn't work out. So it's the presentation, not the file. The leading land use in 2015 was forested land at 2,936 acres, followed close behind by residential use with 2,633 acres, with open wetlands at 381 acres and active agriculture at 266 acres as a distant third and fourth. And then the other land uses are also smaller than that. So looking back at the map, you can see the forested land in the light green on here. Residential land is the light yellow. Open wetlands are indicated by the light blue markings in the, let's see if people can at least see my cursor. Light blue markings, those are wetlands. And the olive green is agricultural land. So, like Peter Lewis's farm, there's Peter Lewis's farm, we know about that, and I believe that's the horse farm, things like that. Anyway, so land use map. It's not one of the maps that we would use to differentiate whether or not to conserve something, but it does give, at least as of 2015, a picture of what was here. I believe this map is going to be redone sometime in the next year. What Rob Prine was saying was it's based on an aerial photograph, which I'll show you in a few minutes. And that aerial photograph needed to be redone. So for the master plan, we'll probably get an update on this. Map number 2 is a topography map. This is an interesting map. I'd never seen this map before. It's produced by an elevation contour data derived from a 2011 Coastal New Hampshire LiDAR study. LiDAR is a technology that uses special aircraft-mounted lasers for measuring elevations. And it contains some pretty interesting detail. If you zoom in, the darker lines are 10-foot elevations, and the lighter gray lines are 2-foot elevations. So you can, on the online copy, you can kind of move around the town and see where the slopes are and things like that. It's really pretty neat. I've never seen that map before. Anyway, that's map number 2. There's not a lot of information there that I think would cause us to have an opinion about conserving something, but it's a good reference.
It might help us decide where to put a trail and not put a trail when we see a cliff on the map.
Yeah. In our planning for the Stickney Cut, there's actually quite a very steep slope right in the middle of the property, going from the lake right out to the highway, which I hadn't realized was there before until Charlie Marino looked at it. But if you look at the contour map, oh yeah, it's really kind of a ridge line that goes through there. And that's the place where we need to go around and through the right-of-way a little bit to get equipment from one side to the other, which is what I was talking about before. Anyway, map number 3 is a soils map. It's a map of the underlying soils types found in Atkinson. And the legend for that lists 5 different kinds of soils, each with their own characteristics. And these are, one of the odd things about this is you notice the dividing lines are really quite distinct lines. And the reason is, these are soils that were deposited by the last glacier during the Ice Age. And it's where the glacial till was left behind. So you have some very, very distinct areas. Again, there's nothing here that would cause us to want to avoid or want to protect a piece of land, but it's a good piece of background information. Oh, I should mention, reading my notes, the data behind this map is derived from a broad-based inventory of underlying soils, which was published by the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 1994 and is not likely to have changed much in the last 30 years. Haven't been any glaciers recently. Okay.
Can you go back to that one and because I can't read anything.
Neither can I.
Tell us what the light green
Okay.
is on the key and the brown and the purple, just the major.
Yeah. Remember, I'm the guy that needs cataract surgery. I have great close-up vision through my left eye. The green is Canton, Hools, something or other.
Chatfield.
Chatfield, yeah. The yellow, which is down in the golf course corner, I think that's what that is. No, down in the Brushwood Drive area, is Canton, Montauk, Paxton.
Okay.
Okay. The orange, which I don't even see on here,
No.
is Canton, Sochuit, Montauk?
Situate.
Situate. You must have studied this stuff.
I have. But I can't read it from.
Yeah, I can't either.
Yeah, that's labeled right across Captain's Pond.
the
Interestingly.
purple is Hickley, Windsor, Canton. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And the orange, which I don't really see on, oh, I guess the big orange area, yeah, is Paxton, Woodridge, Hollis. Believe me, this will be legible in the report. Okay, moving on. Agricultural soils. So this is now looking at surface soils rather than soils that are kind of underneath everything else. This represents surface soils near the surface of the ground as opposed to underlying soils depicted in the previous map. Looking at the legend for this map, we see that the underlying soil types are shown again, just the lines on this map without shading, with agricultural soils data overlaid on top of that. From the legend, we see that there are 3 categories of agricultural soils shown on the map. Soils of statewide importance are shown in green, soils of local importance in purple, and other areas with good farming soils in blue. So that's what the color code is there. The data behind this map suggests that all the shaded areas are good for farming and certain areas are of local and statewide importance. So looking back at the map, you see the statewide importance in green, the areas of local importance in purple, and other good farming areas in blue. Now this does contain some data that we might find important in wanting to preserve a piece of land. So this is the one of the maps in the next talk, which I'll get to later this evening, that we'll come back to.
Paul, just kind of a side note, one of the original reasons settlers from further south in Massachusetts and Boston came in and considered Atkinson as Plastow was because of a truly excellent agricultural soil.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's something to keep in mind. That soil is still pretty valuable.
It is, it is. Okay. The next map, map 5, is surface waters, watersheds, and FEMA flood hazard areas. Surface waters are things that include ponds, streams, and intermittent streams. Watersheds just indicate where precipitation in that area flows to. And there's, so the coloring here is what direction rainwater will go in. And FEMA flood hazard areas are these little areas that are kind of cross-hatched. Those things there. Looking at the legend for this map, we see that the flood hazard areas are represented by cross-hatched markings, as I just mentioned. Watersheds are indicated by colored areas, and streams are solid lines, and intermittent seasonal streams are indicated by dashed lines. So if we look back at the map, the watershed areas are the Arlington Mill Reservoir watershed in light green. That's up by the pond, Big Island Pond. There. The lower Spigot River watershed in purple. I mean, this water all winds up in the Atlantic Ocean, but it's just what stream it gets there by is what they're talking about. The lower Merrimack River watershed in light blue.
Do you know why that's called that, since it has to go through Little River or some other stream to get there?
I didn't make the map.
I know, I was just curious.
I don't know. Yeah, my standard answer to that, I've already decided, my pre-recorded answer is, that's a very good question, worthy of further research. In other words, I don't know the answer. And the Little River watershed is in beige. I don't know why this isn't.
Which flows into the Merrimack.
Which flows into the Merrimack, which flows into it.
That's what
So-
begged the question, I
Yeah.
think.
There's not a lot here to differentiate one, part of Atkinson from another. So this one will not play much of a role in making decisions, but it is good historical information. Next one is groundwater resources and aquifers. So on this map, if you look at the legend, there's actually 3 different kinds of things being shown. Let me deal with the wells and wellhead protection areas. There are public drinking water wells, mostly Hawk, Hempstead Area Water Company wells, which are these little blue circles with a dot. Those each have a wellhead protection area which is required, I think, by state law. Is that true, Sue? That depending on the groundwater withdrawal, there are some restrictions that the state places within those areas. I'm not aware that that's ever come up in any planning board meetings that I've been at, but maybe it has to do with toxic waste dumps and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, it comes up in the context that, like, for instance, there's a plan right now that we haven't signed yet that will have a community water supply because they're going to employ so many people.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
they have to have that grade of a system.
That's right.
And some of your condos aren't on Hawk. They have their own
That's
systems
true.
managed by Pennachuck.
Yep, yep.
So,
But they're
And that-
basically wells that serve a certain number of people. I think is what it
Right.
is, yeah. There are indications on here, why my cursor keeps disappearing, of potential contamination sources. Some that, well, we won't talk about those. But the Sunoco station, for example, had a, what was it that leaked? It wasn't PFAS. It was.
no, it was before
MBTE.
PFAS.
Yeah.
It was
MBTE.
PCBs and
MBTE, yeah. Anyway,
MTB.
MTBE. But the interesting thing on here is the stratified drift aquifers that are indicated in colors. And if you look at them, they're basically 2 areas of town that have stratified drift aquifers. On the eastern side, basically under Bryant Woods, and on the western side, basically at the tail end of West Side Road. A stratified drift aquifer is an area of sand and gravel underground that, unlike drilling into bedrock, water can actually accumulate there and it can be withdrawn relatively easily, and it's one of the things that I think is worthy of protecting. The public water supply data was obtained from New Hampshire DES, and it was last updated in 2017. And the stratified drift aquifer data came from the Complex Systems Research Center at UNH. And the potential contamination site data came from, again, from DES, and was based on reports from well operators and other reports submitted to DES. This data was last updated in 2019. So that's what's contained there. Wetlands. This is always a hot topic for conservation commissions. Map 7 gives an overview of the wetland areas in town. And looking at the legend, we see that wetlands or hydric soils are shown in green and prime wetlands are outlined in orange. And just for the TV audience, I will mention that prime wetlands were delineated in a prime wetland study conducted in 2002 and have been approved by the town for special protections both through our zoning and through state regulations which are administered by New Hampshire DES. So, looking back at the map, you can see the general locations of wetlands and prime wetlands in Atkinson. For this plan, we chose to define wetlands by soil type, namely poorly drained and very poorly drained soils, in order to be consistent with how our zoning defines them. There's evidently another way to define them, and we chose to be consistent with zoning. The soils data behind this map was based on field work conducted by the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, which was completed in 1985. It is generally believed that soil types do not change much over time. However, please note that this map is a good example of the earlier point that I made, that while these maps are a good general indication of our conservation attributes, they should never be considered as surveys or really current conditions. If you want to really know where the wetlands are, you've got to have a wetland scientist basically go out and flag them. But it's useful to know, at least in, where was this, 1985, where wetlands were believed to be at that time. Open space. This is a map that I worked a lot with Rob on because the open space that's in Granite is woefully out of date. There's some land that we own that's just not flagged in Granite as conservation land. There's a lot of the open space around cluster developments that's just not correctly cataloged in Granite. And I worked for about 2 months with an intern from the Nature Conservancy who had been brought on specifically to help conservation commissions to update Granite. I gave her all the information, she did all the shapefiles, submitted it to UNH, and it's still not in Granite. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe the master plan committee can boot them to update it. So this data here is based again on my COVID hobby of looking around at all of the land owned by the town. So what's here is more accurate than what's in Granite. Looking at the legend, there's a lot of different kinds of protections on land. But in general, looking back at the map, town-owned conservation land is shown in green on this map. Cluster development open space is shown in the salmon color. And easements are indicated by polka dots. Green dots for easements held by the town and red dots for easements held by others, such as Southeast Land Trust. And Sue, you will notice that I'm being hopeful that
We're
will...
close.
You're close, okay. You're on the map
We haven't
already.
chosen a closing date, but we're close.
You're on the map. Municipal land such as Town Hall is shown in light purple, and undesignated town-owned land that is not under conservation protection is shown in gray on this map. So if the town is looking for someplace to put a police station, those might be places that they might want to look at. This information shown in this map was completely researched, as I mentioned, by me and updated as part of my quarantine hobby, and represents both a search of the town's tax records and a search of the Rockingham County Registry of Deeds. The Conservation Commission maintains a local database of deeds and plans that substantiates the information shown on this map. So that's the big spreadsheet I gave to Sue Capetta, that she can look this stuff up. I think she loves it. Okay.
Valuable.
Next attribute map is wildlife habitats and features. This contains information about wildlife habitat in Atkinson and contains data from 2 separate studies. Looking at the legend, data from a 2014 study of the Merrimack River watershed area is shown by crosshatching, olive green being more important than blue, and I noticed that there is no olive green anywhere on our map. This data includes both habitat considerations along with water quality and recreational considerations, and thus is a broader indicator than just habitat. The solid colors in this map are based on data from the more recent and more familiar Wildlife Action Plan completed by New Hampshire Fish and Game, and reflects data that was last updated in 2020. So looking back, the solid areas are from the Wildlife Action Plan, and the crosshatched blue areas are from the Merrimack Valley Plan. You'll see that there are some overlap between these two studies, which is to be expected, but that the Merrimack Valley study covers a broader area since it includes other considerations beside just habitat. Questions?
You've got to give a shout out for our two pink areas of the highest quality habitat, Sawmill Swamp and Brushwood.
Actually, the pink area down there is Peter Lewis's farm.
Is that Peter Lewis?
I have no idea how Peter Lewis's farm, maybe it's because of bird habitat. I mean, there are birds that require large fields for habitat, and they have large fields, so I don't know. Like I said, I didn't make the map.
If they're on the map, we should talk to them about the fact that they're mowing the field 3 weeks before the bobolinks leave.
Go right ahead.
In June.
So it just, it doesn't really show us why, like, the blue, like, what particular,
Yeah, the blue I don't understand. As I drive around town, a lot of that is developed neighborhoods at this point.
yeah, some
So
of
it-
it's my, like, I'm looking at that one, it's like my backyard.
Yeah.
That square,
Yeah, sort of, let's see. Right in here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my yard is totally, completely up here. And, all of Maple Avenue up here has been built, so. You'll see that when we get to doing our analysis, we ignore the blue hatched area, just for that reason.
Speaking of birds, that area, the purple area up there is one of the very few, now I'm blanking, for the very small bird, now I can't think of the name of it.
Bobolink?
No,
No.
bobbling spade.
Yeah. Think of it later. We'll move on. Okay. This is the aerial photo that was done in 2015. This is the photo that the land use map I showed earlier is based on. And also coming up in a couple of slides is an impervious surface map. Those were all based on this map. And I envision people who were retired from the CIA, who were spy satellite experts at looking at screens and identifying what's there. Somebody has to sit down with this photograph and go through and figure out where the impervious surfaces are and where the agricultural stuff is and where the woods are, and then that's not a job that I would want per se. Anyway, it's not a very useful photograph.
Sorry, woodcock.
Woodcock, okay,
There's only 2 sites in the state, and we have one.
cool. Yeah, so as part of the conservation plan, we put together our own aerial photograph. It's ultimately, I think, based on Google Earth, but it's been corrected so there's no angular distortion. And as you zoom in, we can put tax map lines, and they line up pretty good with streets and don't go through people's roofs and things like that. So we've got a pretty good aerial photograph. I don't know if the master plan people would want to use or not. Rob Prine snubs his nose at it because it's not GIS based, but it's a pretty good aerial photograph. Okay.
Can I tell you about some maps, aerials that were done as Southeast Land Trust was studying our land? He had aerial photographs of the wide area, not just our property, but within, half a mile around
Yeah.
our house, all the way back to 1920s or 30s.
Yeah, Dean had said 1935.
And it was
Yeah.
fascinating
Yeah,
to watch
yeah.
the changes
Yeah, yeah,
historically.
yeah.
Tell
Google
the
Earth
story.
will let you do that to a certain point, but they peter out around 1990.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know where he got it all, but it
Yeah.
was really interesting.
cool, it's good stuff. Okay, here's the impervious surface map. Let me see if I can zoom in on here. Yeah, the light gray areas are either parking lots or roofs, and the dark areas, other than the lettering, is streets. So this is something I think that the master plan keeps track of over time. I did have something I wanted to say about impervious surfaces. Impervious surfaces are significant because they block rainwater from replenishing our groundwater resources. For this reason, the town's subdivision regulations that are administered by the planning board take special care to require stormwater retention areas for runoff from impervious surfaces to allow rainwater to replenish our drinking water supply instead of flowing downstream into the ocean.
As much as possible.
As much
Keep
as
it on
possible.
site. Keep it on site.
Keep it on site, yeah, okay. So that was map 11. Map 12 is an unfragmented block map that Rob Prine put together, and I'd never seen this map before. But unfragmented blocks are areas that are mostly wooded and have no street crossings that would impede the migration of wildlife. Mostly because our zoning has driven development of a lot of cul-de-sacs. This is a very useful byproduct. I don't know if the planning board had thought of that when they came up with.
When they did, you
But
wonder.
it's an extremely useful byproduct of the fact that we have cul-de-sacs rather than a grid of streets. As you can see, the unobstructed blocks cross town boundaries, since critters don't care about boundaries or property lines. The different colors in this map represent the various sizes of these blocks. Such unobstructed swaths of land are an important natural resource, and as you will see when I talk about conservation priorities in the third of these presentations, they are one of our priorities when considering future conservation projects. Okay, map 13 is forest resource potential. Map 13 takes a look at the land's ability to produce timber and other forest products and is based on an analysis of soils data. Looking at the legend for this map, there are three broad categories of soils data presented here. The bright green areas contain soils that are well suited for hardwood production, such as oak and maple. The light olive green areas are more sandy than the first category, and although not ideal, can also sustain hardwood production. The dark olive green areas contain soils that are less fertile and drier than the first two areas and are well suited for softwoods, especially white pine. So take a look back at the map. There's just a side comment here that I mentioned earlier. We are planning a selective timber cut. The Conservation Commission's periodic timber harvests are not driven by the revenue potential for timber sales. While our selective timber harvests are done to improve the health and diversity of our forests, the revenue from timber sales helps to offset the cost of planning and carrying out the harvest. And any small excess in revenue is placed in the Forest Maintenance Fund, which is used to care for other aspects of our forests, such as invasive plant control. So I know as we get into doing our selective timber harvests, we're going to be having people thinking we're making tons of money. Well, we don't. It doesn't work that way. Also, I should notice that almost anywhere in Atkinson is good timber soil, and so that doesn't really differentiate one area over another one. And you'll see when we get to our analysis, we really don't consider this map. Finally, the map 14 is the Connecting the Coast study done by the Nature Conservancy and Southeast Land Trust in 2019. They did a study including Atkinson based on aerial photographs and other GIS data that predicts the likelihood of wildlife corridors and what they call prioritized blocks, which are areas where good wildlife habitat is likely to exist. Looking at the legend, wildlife corridors are shown in light blue and the prioritized blocks are beige. As with many other maps I have just shown, the information presented here needs to be verified by on-the-ground observations and other research. It is the theoretical place where there would be wildlife corridors, not the actual place. And Pete, you've been trying to capture wildlife in one of the corridors up near where you live, and you haven't found much, right? No.
Until now.
Oh, okay. Well, these are based on theory. I was trying to make the point before that you don't look at these things with a micrometer, and you always need to go put some boots on your feet and go out and look at them. But they're a good indicator of the theoretically where there are likely to be wildlife corridors.
And it can vary from year to year, as we found out. We have bobcats, deer, foxes, and other animals that haven't been seen for years.
Yeah.
And now suddenly running through the semi-wild areas of
Yeah,
conservation land.
And as we do forest improvements, you'll see other wildlife come in also. So.
I've seen them in my backyard.
Anyway, we're getting near the end of part one here. These maps are contained in section 4 of the report. They form the basis of the next section, which is an analysis of conservation priorities and opportunities, which I'll talk about after a probably 5-minute break. We need to acknowledge funding from the Grassroots Environmental Fund that provided funding to help us articulate our goals and actually write the grant application to the Moose Plate people who funded the majority of the work to produce the maps and other information contained in the report. So that ends part one. I'd like to call a 5-minute recess. Dave, if you're awake back in the control room, I need